So next week we're gonna have some interesting plot points to pick up off of this strange and erratic but very Robert Rodriguez episode. So dive in right now for all the speculation and predictions on this Star Wars Lads episode.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Book of Boba Fett predictions and speculation. This week we will be talking about next Wednesday's episode, Chapter 4 of the Book of Boba Fett. Yeah, so if you haven't already, check out our review of Chapter 3. It dropped on Wednesday. If you haven't seen that, we go into full spoilers on Chapter 3 of the Book of Boba Fett, the Streets of Mos Espa. If you watched it, you know our thoughts on it. I think we're both pretty mixed on it. I think I was mixed a little bit more negative than Sanak, but we both didn't love the episode. We are going to get into spoilers, obviously, in this video as well, because we will be talking about everything that happens in Chapter 3 for Chapter 4. So if you haven't seen the episode, watch it first, come back, watch this after. You've been warned. This will be full spoilers. So, as usual, we kind of break these videos down into 2 or 3 parts, focusing on the flashback storyline and also the main present-day storyline. This past episode of the Book of Boba Fett, like the other 2 before it, was predominantly about one storyline and less about the other one, this time being the present-day or the 9ABY storyline, with Boba as the daimyo trying to gain control of Mos Espa, and the flashback was about 5 to 7 minutes long in a 40-minute episode. So we're going to be talking about the flashback first because there's a lot less to speculate. Again, with the flashback, to summarize what happened, Boba rides a bantha. Very slow means transportation. I guess they have no speeders left. He just rides it into Mos Eisley. We get to see Mos Eisley, which was cool. We got to see Pelimoto from The Mandalorian. We got to see the Stormtrooper helmets on stakes that we get to see in the Chapter 5 of The Mandalorian as well. Got some callbacks to all that. And then Boba meets with the Pike leader, who is apparently now one of the heads in Mos Eisley. And they have a discussion, and this leader tells him, you're not the only ones who want protection money. There's also this Nikto biker gang that is what we're paying currently to protect us and to not attack us, and they are going to be your competition. So Boba rides back to the Tusken village where everyone is killed. So I think right off the bat, we have not a very directed speculation anymore, because almost all of our speculation from last week regarding this was now wrong, because we did not expect them all to just die immediately. But we did not see the female Tusken, so there are some Tuskens that are most definitely still alive, because they would have shown our big characters if they died. How big of a role they still play in the show, I would assume, is still pretty high, but I think as of now, Boba is mostly going to be reeling from the fact that he just lost his new family that he was born again into in the last episode. And his new Jabba, per se, his new leader to look up to, his new Jango, his new father figure, if you would, with the Tusken chief. So he's lost him, he's burned their bodies, he's trying to move on from that. And we're going to see probably Boba transition from Tusken life finally back into the real world. And he's most likely going to be taking on the Nikto gang, trying to find them and kill them for what they did to his new family. But also, I hope that can finally lead us into the Finnick reveal, because we have to see how they met. They seem far closer, as we've said, in The Mandalorian and in the Book of Boba Fett, than, 2 people who are unacquainted, that somebody who just hired Finnick once. They have history, they have adventures together. Whether that does take place in like a Bad Batch timeline, we don't know. Maybe it starts there and transitions later into an older relationship, but I think this is a good place to start, considering both of these characters did first reappear in The Mandalorian. It's a good place to start with their relationship in live action. I think the next episode will give us a bit more of an interesting angle, a little less cliched angle maybe to the flashbacks for the Boba Fett flashback timeline. And my strongest prediction would be that he rides again into Mos Eisley or wherever Finnick will be, and he meets Finnick. Maybe he hires her to help him track down the Nyctos. Who knows? But I think the Tuscan storyline seems to be on hold for now, and I think it will probably be picked back up a little later in the season, maybe to come full circle with the current timeline, or maybe he just never sees them again until the current timeline and rediscovers them and brings them back as part of his new ragtag army in the present time. So, anyway, that's kind of the direction we have to look at for the flashback timeline. What are your thoughts on what could possibly happen with the flashbacks in chapter 4?
I mean, that's tough because what we've seen in this episode, Boba comes on this banta into Mos Eisley, and we see that kind of iconic, like, I don't know what's like the opposite of like a positive tribute, but like a warning of sorts of like the stormtrooper heads on the spikes that we see in that first season of Mandalorian, and it's very clear that it's just happened. Like this is, I'm trying to think about it timeline wise. I want to say at most this is like 2 months, 2 months or maybe 3 months into his life post Return of the Jedi, and I mean, he seems like he's been able to communicate with the Pikes, right? He says like, "Have you gotten my message?" I don't think he's like flying a bird or something. I think he has some sort of tech or whatever. He's gotten a gun now. I don't know. Was that in the last episode that he had his Tusken Raider gun? I think he only had his gaffy stick.
He uses one and breaks it in the Tashi Station fight, but I guess he
Right,
could just take another one.
right. So I mean, it seems like some sort of time has passed, some sort of openness to technology instead of just being isolated has happened with crime syndicates and anyone on Tatooine. I expect things to take time to be slow, even with technology. So I think timelines wise, we've moved into like 3 months, but enough time for the events of Return of the Jedi to have really hit in there. And we are, I guess, approaching in a few months to the Battle of Jakku that like truly ends the war, but on a backwater planet like Tatooine, the war is over. Like, there's nothing the Empire is going to do to protect a dirt hole like this, right? But I mean, we've lost the Tuscan story. Like, we got a lot in the last 2 episodes. So I'm not going to actually complain about that. I thought it was very poignant that the two again, this is just from seeing some of the Star Wars Explained videos, but um, one of the podcasts that they referenced in one of the videos that they did on their channel was that in the first episode we see three archetypes that Boba's had in his life: the child, the warrior, and now the chief. And he's looking up to the chief. He was the warrior, and he had his childhood like stripped of him, no guidance of real sorts. And it's very curious to me that, they got rid of e essentially, they got rid of the child and the chief. Well, those 2. Like, it's very sad seeing him get rid of, like, Into the Fire, the child's, like, gaffy stick toy of sorts. So, 1, it feels like he's very much feels like that, yeah, that family that I was part of, it's gone. Like, he feels that childlike abandonment once again because the kid's also dead, and that also could be like in a way to signal to Boba like, hey, that could have been me. Maybe this in a way was like a plan to draw me out to leave everyone, vulnerable to this attack. And then what is it? The chief, the guy who was looking up to, the one who was like in a way like trying to like appeal to, live up to, almost like show his fullest admiration to. He's dead. We don't see the female warrior. So I'm very curious what that really means messaging wise. Are we trying to say that now for the next 4 years, Boba's just like this Jundland wastelands, Dune Sea, like takes up Obi-Wan's mantle of like, oh, I'm gonna make great dragon noises, but instead of doing that, I'm just here to kill you and kill anyone in my sight? Does he just live through this life as a warrior? I'm not sure, but I think regardless, we will see some happenings with Fennec because it doesn't seem like Fennec is just temporarily on Tatooine. I think she's kind of established to stay there before, the bounty is out on her. So I could see some interactions happening there. Like you said, is it enough time to do that and then free her again or save her life again and then eventually get to Slave One in Jabba's hangar in an episode? I hope so. I think these flashbacks, the way that they've been structured so far, we have to make an episode where it's flashback jumping, like between these 5 years, because if we keep at this crawling pace, we'll reach like year two by the last episode. And I don't think that's anyone's intention. As fun as it is to see any sort of backstory for all Star Wars characters, it is tradition, but that part of the story can be sped up. So yeah, I'm expecting a little bit more of like this warrior Boba to just be the only lifestyle that he's like stuck in once more. I expect him to. That's why he looks so strong, looks so powerful in Mando season two. He's just been like this cold-blooded, vengeful killer with crazy eyes, just roaming around the desert. And eventually, I don't know what calls him to this life again. Maybe it's because he meets a Fennec and thinks about, hey, I need to get back to like civilization. I need to reintegrate. Maybe that's when he feels like he owes it to the kid and the chief to fulfill childlike wonder, but also, you know, the admiration and the reverence that comes from being a leader. Maybe those things play a role that I'm not just seeing quite yet. But I do think that this warrior being disappeared for so long and him possibly just being alone for so long forces him into this archetype that he gets stuck in. And I would like to see a Boba that's a little bit more downtrodden, but just has nothing left to live for other than to fight and to kill. So I'd like to see that. I'm not sure how that's going to be paced out. This definitely needs to be a longer episode, regardless. 45 to 55 minutes, please, because I need to see a good amount of just you know, fallout just to see like, hey, I had this family for such a short time and then in a snap they're gone. Is it my fault? Did I make a mistake? I want him to have some hallucinations. I'd like him to just struggle again because there's nothing that's been easy for Boba. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard to really talk about what comes next in the flashbacks because I just expected, like a unification of Tuscan tribes, of like some more growth. You can go after the Nikto, sure, but I don't know how big that will actually be.
Yeah, I feel like in regards to last week's predictions and speculation, I have the quote from Obi-Wan in The Phantom Menace running through my head where he turns to Qui-Gon in the hangar bay of the Trade Federation cruiser and he says, "You were right about one thing, Master. The negotiations were short." And we did say last week we have no idea where this story is going with the Tuscans. They wrapped up pretty much what we thought the entire arc would be in the first 4 or 5 episodes of this story. And yeah, they wrapped it up because it's gone. I'm sure it will return in parts. And we did get, I think, one of the interesting things that I forgot about until you started talking and I started to remember is we did get a prolonged and stitched together completely shot of the Daniel Logan Boba Fett as Django took off. And we've seen that in different images and segments across the first 2 episodes. We got to see the whole scene. Maybe there is going to be more emphasis given to some of these flashbacks to him as a child. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be, I think a lot of it is going to be pulled from whatever he's encountering in the present day. I think we'll start to get more traditional film type flashbacks where instead of it being two paralleling stories, it's like something triggers this remembrance of something in his past. Who knows? But I think that's an interesting idea. But yeah, that's really it from the flashbacks. There was, like I said, about 10% of this episode was the flashback this time, where last week it was about 60%, and the week before it was like 75 or 80%. So let's talk about the main storyline, which finally got going after 2 episodes of a lot of teasing and setup. this episode gets going onto that storyline. We get a little bit of confirmation on how Bib Fortuna rules with his, or how he ruled before he was killed, by dishing out power to the Trandoshans, the Aqualish, and the Klatooinians. They are all species that we did see very prominently in Jabba's palace. He kind of like oversaw it all, but really the power lied with those people. He was just a figurehead. I thought that was an interesting idea, even if it was just dumped right at the beginning of the episode and never really returned to. But I think it does set up stakes for part of our bounty hunter war that's going to be on, because really, and it does clarify a little bit of why people don't really look at whoever's sitting on the throne in Jabba's palace as like the ruler of Tatooine. The daimyo is not really the ruler, because the daimyo hasn't had power in like 3 or 4 or 5 years. So it makes sense in that respect. I still think people should give a bit more respect to Boba Fett, because they all know who he is. They do. They just don't. Just because he's sitting there doesn't, and he has no army and seems like he has no plan. Anyway, regardless of that, we got that stuff. We got some big progression. Again, this episode progressed so many plot points that were set up in the last episode and just ended them. The twins who showed up, Jabba's cousins, show up in this episode randomly to Jabba's palace and are like, hey, we were told that this was ours for the taking, but apparently it's not. It's been promised by the mayor to another syndicate, which it turns out is the Pike Syndicate, who Boba no doubt feels is responsible for the murder of his family, even indirectly, with the Tuskens. So that's setting up that conflict there. We had the Black Chrysanthemum fight, which ultimately ended with Chrysanthemum being captured in the Rancor pit, and then now he is released by Boba just to go do whatever he wants. I'm sure he'll be back in some capacity. I thought that interaction, though, was a little weird. It felt like they had never met before, which they have met so many times. Like the way Boba talked to him, he's like teaching him a lesson. He kind of talked down to him. I felt like it was strange. It was like Boba had no idea who this guy was. I felt like that could have been a little tightened. And then we get the introduction of the Rancor and Danny Trejo as the Rancor keeper. Not gonna lie, I'm very disappointed it's not Malakili, but maybe this is like Malakili's brother or his best friend. I hope they reference Malakili at some point. Yeah, yeah. Anyway, Danny Trejo is going to be in the rest of this show apparently as the Rancor teacher or trainer, the new Rancor keeper, and he's going to be teaching Boba how to ride a Rancor, which we did hear a lot of rumors about leading up to this show. So we're kind of there. The major domo of the mayor's office. We have this speeder chase with this new biker gang that's working for Boba Fett, and these characters. Sophie Thatcher's character has been speculated on by many on who she is going to be. I don't know. I think this group of bikers seem to kind of be adopted into the Boba Fett way. Maybe they are treated as kind of adopted children, the same way, like kind of the antithesis of how the scrum rats are treated on I'm blanking on the planet's name, Corellia in Solo. Maybe it's kind of the opposite of that, where Boba is actually a caring mentor who's helping them get off the streets in a certain way. But I don't know if it's going to go much beyond that at this point, at least from what the evidence we've seen. So yeah, that's kind of where we set up. We have the Pikes, we have the Trandoshans, the Aqualish, and the Klatooinians. We have all these different groups going to war apparently for Tatooine, and we have Boba, who has 5 bikers and 2 Gamorreans helping him out, who are also going to war on Tatooine. I'm hoping for a little bit more, but yeah, what are your thoughts on the setup here for the different factions and kind of a new bounty hunter war on Tatooine, and what this will all mean moving forward into Chapter 4, where we will most definitely, I'm now betting a lot of money on the fact that we are finally going to see this dinner scene that we've been talking about for the last 2 weeks, because it is pretty much the last thing from the trailer we haven't seen. So yes, with all that, what are your thoughts on how Chapter 4 will take all these elements in?
I mean, I think the dinner scene is going to be a pretty crucial scene. I think this will be Boba's last time kind of playing nice. I think he's taking this position with not necessarily reverence, because he does like to follow his own way. He doesn't want to be carried on a litter. He doesn't wait for any appointments. He does a multitude of things all at once, it seems like. But for him, and he's made it a point, he's like, I need to send a message. I need to send a message. And it kind of makes me think of that line that Fennec has at the beginning of episode one when they first go to the mayor's. You know, he wants to rule but with respect, sure. But fear can be a useful tool in in a time of need. And I think I don't like we've discussed this before. This dinner scene will not go perfectly well. Like, yeah, he'll sell them on like, let's share the riches. Join me. Give me your forces that we need. Let's do this together. Let's utilize everything we have. And I will ensure that things will be better than Bib. Maybe not Jabba's level, but they'll be better than Bib ever handled things. And I think that's how he's gonna sell it. And they're gonna see it's two pretty fit Gamorrean guys. They're not like Jabba's Gamorreans. They got like those body build, like a real like stonemason cure builds out there. And they'll see the kids and be like, we're really gonna put our trust in this guy. Like, sure, Fennec, I got respect for you. Well, I got respect for you as a bounty hunter, but I don't know. There will be some that'll take that bet, I think, but some won't. Some might start working for the Pikes because I'm pretty sure now that we got all these Pikes off the ships, they're just going to start like working, organize, assemble. They have a whole landing party, right? They have different roles to play here. They're not just going to walk around and march around. I think they're going to connect to their network that they already have there and create like a groundswell. So the only way Boba can counter that is if he has the full support of these the Aqualish, Trandoshans, and all these different people, and he'll give them respect. But for the ones that, you know, disrespect him, the ones that don't take his kindness well, his mercy, his pity, I think we're gonna see Boba Fett kind of kick ass, and it makes me think that this is another thing that I saw in Star Wars explained in that one pretty recent video that we talked about it. Everyone's talking about it. Why does Boba feel like he's been nerfed a bit? Like, yeah, sure, TV shows are known for like kind of bumping down the level of their main characters to make them more appealing, can do more interesting things with them. Yeah, possibly, but I think they're the way Molly from Star Wars explained kind of processed it out. It seems like maybe there's also like a mental block that he thinks that he needs to back the tank, even though in the flashbacks, he's flying on, he's jumping on trains, he's kicking ass, he's taking names, right? Like he's doing a lot, and even in Mando season 2, he's doing a lot. I just think that everything is kind of rushing into him at the worst time, and he's thinking like it's not mental, it's physical. I gotta heal. I gotta get my body right. If my body is right, everything will be right. And I think this episode will push him to realize like, no, I'm just I understand that maybe it went too far during my Imperial bounty hunting days, working for whoever would give me money and all that. Maybe it's not what I'm living up to as my father. Maybe I'm just letting everything hit me all at once. But there is a way to balance everything that made me who I am. I am not the hero of the story. I am the anti-hero. I'm not a villain, but I do have some rougher edges and worse tendencies. And I think he needs to remember that, and I think that's when we'll start to see him be like this impressive fighter once more. And we've seen Tamora Morrison just in a Robert Rodriguez episode, nonetheless, just destroy everybody. So I'm expecting us to see him kick back into gear. There's just a mental block. I really don't think it's a physical thing, and I think once he realizes he has to be that villain of sorts when necessary, that he has to be a little bit more aggressive about how he's taking this. He has to take it to them instead of waiting and reacting. He has to be proactive. I think that's going to change with that dinner scene. What more is there to do? I mean, I could see him be proactive with the speeder bike gang. These are human characters. I can see him, especially taking time with the girl, especially kind of show her what he means, what business, inspire, lead. Sure, I don't know how much will be supposed focused on her, but it seems like he has some respect for them already, and they have respect for him, and I expect that to grow. I expect them to be more mentor-student relationships with all of them a little bit more, and for them to fall more in line with him instead of just being those edgy bikers like they were in this episode. There's not enough time for a guy who's reacting to everything, who's got some sort of block in his head, to like set the record straight and actually make them like lieutenants in his bounty hunter war that's about to kick off. Like now, this is the episode where he has to take charge. I think he will. I'm optimistic. Maybe I'm putting a lot of misplaced optimism, but I think now that we got the Robert Rodriguez episodes out of the way, I have a lot more belief.
Yeah, I don't know. I buy the mental block thing more if it had something to do with reclaiming the armor, or reclaiming some part of throne, or something to do with the bounty hunting. But I mean, this guy was like completely fine in The Mandalorian, and now he's acting like he's come right out of the Sarlacc pit. It's been 5 years. I don't know. I'm not buying what they're selling right now with Boba in the modern day and why he's is being nerfed. And I again, I'm not a person who's like, I need Boba to be flying around, shooting rockets, taking out 50 people at once, doing flamethrowers, but there are just general logical things that don't make sense that we've seen in The Mandalorian. Like, we've seen him fly around after just getting his armor back 5 minutes before, flying around taking down stormtroopers, using his flamethrower against other Mandalorians, in perfect sync, using his rope, using his knee rockets, using all this stuff that he has to his name and who he is. And maybe that's why people aren't respecting him right now, because he's not doing any of that. I'm starting to buy a little bit more of why he wants to rule with respect, because he has this new idyllic figure with the Tusken chief who rules with respect, right? And I'm starting to buy that more, but I'm also not buying that Boba's going to let people walk all over him. I haven't seen the Boba I want yet, and I feel like that the Boba I want is even tiers below what some people are complaining about. Like, I'm just wanting standard Boba from Mandalorian season 2. And I feel like when we get that, then I'll start to come around a bit more on the show. And I just feel like it's one thing to depower him, but it's another thing to like make him seem like he's just dumb at times, and like he has no idea what's going on. He doesn't know when people are being sarcastic to him. He doesn't know when people are talking down to him. He doesn't know, like he just, it seems like he has no common sense at times. Like, he does, why is he wanting to be a daimyo if he doesn't know any of these things? I just still not buying any of that yet. But again, I think there is a lot to be optimistic about, and I think there is going to be a ton of stuff from this episode that feeds nicely into the overall narrative. And next week, we will now be over halfway done with the show. As we hit this point, next week is a pivotal episode. Chapter 4 is a pivotal episode for what this show will be. What it does in the flashback timeline will cement what the flashbacks are like moving forward. Are they more bounty hunter type stuff with Finnick? Do they relate to Tatooine still? I feel like they have to relate to Tatooine. I feel like they have to go full circle on that. They really have to drive it home. Why Tatooine? Why Jabba's palace? Why all this stuff? I think there's a lot of cool story ideas in here, but I'm starting to get a little concerned, especially with the 7-episode series of the Marvel syndrome so far, which has been really cool ideas, really good storytelling, but eventually we get to the last 2 or 3 episodes and it just feels like you needed 5 more instead of 2. Like, there's so much story here, that too many ideas for that they've come up with, and not enough time at all to wrap them up. It's happened in Hawkeye. It happened in for Loki, at least got season 2, so that gave us more hope. It happened in Falcon and Winter Soldier especially, and even at some parts in WandaVision, although that one felt a little too long at times. It's starting to, I'm worried it's becoming a Disney Plus series trend instead of just a Marvel trend. Hopefully I'm proved wrong. Hopefully the Book of Boba Fett gets its storytelling back on track, and hopefully it starts to pick up in the right points and slow down in others, because right now it seems like we're speeding through things that are really important for this story, but we're taking too long on other things that aren't as important for this story. So I'm hoping this show finds a bit more direction, because chapter 4 is going to be key. It really is. But I think that's really it for our speculation. We talked about all the stuff from the trailers that we haven't seen, which really is just one scene. We've talked about the flashbacks, and we've talked about all these new characters that showed up in this and the new events that have come out of it. So thank you all so much for watching this week's episode of the Book of Boba Fett Predictions and Speculations. This was chapter 4, but stay tuned. Next week we will be covering again chapter 4 of the Book of Boba Fett, full spoiler review on Wednesday at 7 a.m. when it drops. You can check that out, and then we will be covering chapter 5 predictions and speculation next Friday as well. And we'll be doing this all the way through the Book of Boba Fett, all 7 chapters. We will be covering predictions, speculation, and reviews. And then eventually we'll be covering season 2 speculation, if it is to be announced. And hopefully it will be, because I think the show, despite its flaws, it still has a ton of room for there to be an insane amount of stories in this world. And again, 30-year gap. We've talked about it with Luke. We've talked about with all these characters how people want to shove this 30 years into, like, we need to get rid of the sequels because Luke's not the same as he was at the Return of the Jedi. 30 years. We have 30 years before the sequels. We have so much time to do stuff with Boba Fett, and I would love to see season 2, even if this show is not as well received as The Mandalorian. So that is it. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next week for 3 more Star Wars Lads videos.